everyone. My name is Betty George. I'm the Program Coordinator for Alberta Hospice Palliative Care Association. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about boundaries, something that we probably encounter every day in our regular lives, and especially as a volunteer, and why boundaries are so important, both from a volunteer point of view, but also from the organization's point of view, why it's important to have boundaries in place. So today we'll talk about what is a boundary, how do we define that? Why is it we need them? Why can't we just sort of go on our gut feeling if something feels okay or not? What are our limits to boundaries as a volunteer? The difference between a friend and a friendly visitor? And then we'll go over those tricky case scenarios, things that you might encounter that could prove to really challenge your thinking a little bit. So let's start off with what is a boundary. So it's defined as a limit or a line that defines what's acceptable or not. Easy, right? What's acceptable or not. But probably we have a big variance in what my boundaries might be versus what your boundaries might be. So for example, I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. I shut my cell phone off because I don't want any rings or dings or anything waking me up during the night. So that's my boundary. I want to have my 8 hours of sleep. Another boundary might be your own physical space, that hugging kind of thing. Are you a hugger? Do you go right in and reach for the hug when you meet somebody or see somebody you haven't met in a while? Or a bit more, you have your boundaries there. Who do you allow to hug you? It could be lending money. Maybe, that kid, that adult comes up to you and, hey, I'm going to borrow 20 bucks and I promise I'll pay you back. But you know that they haven't paid you back the last few times they've asked for 20 bucks. So your boundaries might be, no, sorry, I don't lend money to people. That's how I do things, right? So it could, boundaries can be very different from person to person. We're going to talk today, of course, about the volunteer boundaries, not just from a volunteer's point of view, though, but also from the organization's point of view. What are their policies and procedures around volunteers? So we'll be looking at it kind of from both sides. Why are boundaries important from a volunteer's point of view, but also it could be from the organization's point of view? So first of all, it's your personal well-being. We know that if we put up some boundaries, it does affect or help our mental health or emotional health. So for an example, you are scheduled to be a friendly visitor for a 3-hour shift once a week. Now, your organization might have that in their policy and procedures. One shift is 3 hours a week. Okay, why do they have that? Why can't you make that 4 hours, 5 hours, make that twice a week because you really get along with the person you're visiting with? Why not go more often? It really is put in place for your emotional and mental health. Okay, it does prevent burnout. So by having those boundaries around there telling you, this is what we would expect, not to go more than that, it's really to prevent that burnout. And it could also be that what can kind of happen and sneak in is that you do your 3-hour shift and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm right within my boundaries. That's perfect. But you go home and you start thinking about them and you can't stop thinking about them. I wonder how they're doing. I wonder if, they're doing okay with the other volunteer that's with them today. Because really, maybe nobody can do it as good as I can do it. And I feel like I need to be there. That could be crossing boundaries, even if you're not actually there in the room with them. Okay. Clear expectations. Why are clear expectations important? This is super important especially when you are dealing with other staff. So you know your roles and responsibilities. So the nurses, for example, know exactly what you're capable of doing as a volunteer. They're not going to be asking you to give medications or to bathe them or to do things like that. There's a very clear expectation of what a volunteer can do. And it makes your job easier, right? Because you're not always having to try guess what it is you're supposed to be doing. You know what the nurses do, you know what the social worker does, you know what the chaplain does, what your role is in the organization. Respect. Having boundaries ultimately leads to respect. So if you are saying, when I'm a friendly visitor, I go in to visit, this is my shift, this is what I do, but now they're asking you, oh, by the way, while you're here, could you shovel my sidewalk? Or while you're here, could you just run a load of laundry through the washing machine? Well, that might not feel very respectful of your time, of your talents, of what you've been trained to do. So by sticking to your boundaries, that is a respectful sign. Safety. I think of safety as, in this case, like a physical safety. So it could be your organization's boundaries or yourself. that says, I will not go to someone's home to visit at night in the dark if I'm by myself. There needs to be somebody else present in the home. Okay, that could be a boundary. And it could be the organization saying, no, we don't do visits in the evenings. So the safety piece is important from an organization and your own personal safety. How does that feel? Do I feel safe doing this? Or maybe being asked to do something that you're not really feeling comfortable with. We know some volunteers can do feeding. They'll feed someone if they're no longer able to feed themselves. If you haven't done the training and they go, oh, you know what, it's fine. They're fine. They're not a choke risk. You go right ahead and do it. I don't know. I think there needs to be that boundary again from the organization, but also from yourself saying, you know what, I haven't done the training. I'm not super confident in doing this. I'm not really feeling comfortable with this. So I'll have to say no. Okay. And knowing that that's okay. Sustainability of commitment. That's just another way of saying we want you to stick around. You've done the training, you've done the onboarding, you're ready to go. By having boundaries, it pretty much is going to ensure that you're going to stick around a bit longer. You're going to be happy with your role. So in addition to you wanting to be able to make that commitment, your organization definitely wants you to be able to make that commitment. So that is a reason for having those boundaries. Hey, we want you to stick around longer. We don't want you to be burnt out. Healthy relationships. Healthy relationships from a volunteer point of view to other volunteers, to staff, to your clients. Boundaries are important in this case because we want to know when our volunteer role ends and when a friendship, for example, begins. All right. So do I want to become friends with everybody on my social media? I don't know. But your organization might have something to say about, can you become friends with your clients or your patients on social media? Do you want them to see what you're doing in your private life, where you've gone and where you've been and who your family is and all that sort of thing? So you may feel quite okay becoming friends on social media with all the other volunteers and the staff, but your organization might have something to say about healthy relationships with your patients. And the focus on your goal is on the goal. What is your goal? What is it you're wanting to do with your volunteer time as a friendly visitor? So the organization might have rules around cell phones. Why are cell phones not allowed when you're visiting with someone? Well, it might be pretty easy to get distracted, right? Every time it beeps or buzzes or a notification comes through. So they might have a rule that says no cell phones, right? To be able to focus on what it is that you're doing there. So that isn't one reason why boundaries are so important, or many reasons rather why boundaries are so important. Now, I love this picture of the picket fence because so far you've seen the picture of the brick wall. Brick wall is like nothing's getting through. That is solid. But boundaries are only so simple. And in some cases they are. But in many cases, it's more like the picket fence. All right. In many cases, that picket fence shows like, okay, those pickets, that might be keeping a dog out. Maybe a dog isn't getting through that. But there's lots of things that can get through. And that's a really good analogy for boundaries. There are some things that it's just going to be a hard no. No, we do not ever do this. And other times it's like, oh, it's that gray area. Is that gray area? Am I going to do this? I don't know. So let's talk about those hard no's. These are things that no matter what organization you work with, I can almost guarantee you are not going to be doing any of these things or that it will not be allowed. So this is those pickets in the picket fence. Money. Accepting or lending money. It's never going to be allowed. Now, accepting the money, they may say, oh, you've been the best volunteer ever, and you've been coming to visit me every Wednesday. Please take this $100. I want you to go out for a nice dinner. Okay? It's the least I could do for you after all the time you've given to me. Not accept money. If they really insist, you may suggest, especially if you work for like a nonprofit, that they just make a donation to the nonprofit. But let them know. And if you're really uncomfortable saying, I'm sorry, I can't, just you can always fall back on the roles and responsibilities or the policies and procedures. Say, I'm sorry, our organization doesn't allow it. So I'm going to have to refuse that. But if you want to make a donation to the organization, that might work. Okay. Witness legal documents. So they might have, they're working on their will, their power of attorney, their personal directive, whatever that looks like. As a volunteer, we don't witness the legal documents, period, ever. Discuss a patient's diagnosis or prognosis with other family members. Not something we do. So family member comes in the house and they say, oh, it's so good to see you. And I know you've been here for the last few weeks visiting my mom. She's not doing so great, is she? She's kind of taken a turn for the worse, isn't she? How much longer do you think she has? Not our job. We're not going to say that. We're not going to say, well, from my experience, it could now be just looking at weeks. No, you would say, I can see why you're concerned. Why don't I ask one of the nurses to come and talk to you? All right. That would be the best point there. We're not going to discuss the diagnosis or prognosis. Provide medical care or give medication. Again, I don't know any organization that would allow that, to give medical care, dressing changes, bathing, anything like that, or give medication, even as something as simple as a Tylenol sitting on their nightstand. Hey, can you pass me that? We do not do anything with medications. Even if you're doing a home visit, make sure it's very clear when their medication is due and that someone is there to give them the medication. All right. Initiate the MAID discussion. Now, initiate being the key word. If somebody wants to talk to you about MAID, medical assistance in dying, we can certainly listen. We can listen to what their fears are, what their thoughts are around it. But we're not going to initiate it. So they may be saying, I'm so tired of this. Why is it going on so long? I've done my goodbyes. I've said everything I need to say. I've done everything I need to do. I'm just done. Why am I hanging on? You would not say, well, have you heard about MAID? Have you thought about MAID? Is that something that's in your, that you learned about? Never initiate it. If they bring it up, we can have that conversation. Gossip about other members of the care team. Well, I'd like to think we're all adults and we're not going to do that, but maybe there's an opportunity to do that, but it's never okay. So we're going to always be completely professional when it comes to other members of the care team. Preach or save a patient. When I say save, I mean from a religious point of view. So you're going to visit someone, you may have very strong religious beliefs. This person is dying. They don't know what's going to happen to them after they die, where they're going. They're an atheist. They've never believed in anything. Well, now it's my job. I need to save them. I need to teach them about my God, and that'll ensure that they get to heaven or whatever it is your beliefs are. Not our job. So unless you're trained as a spiritual care volunteer, our job is not to save someone, to ensure that they get to wherever on the other side. And become romantically involved. Again, a hard no. Now you might think, okay, well, that's obvious. Like nobody does that, right? Yeah, it does happen. It absolutely does happen. So when you're journeying with somebody who is vulnerable, right? It could be a family member. It could be the patient themselves. And I go visit Bob every week. And he says, no one can make him smile like I can, and no one can make him laugh. And I don't know, I just feel this connection. I feel like there's something going on between us. No, there's not. There's nothing going on between you. You do not become romantically involved with either the patient or a family member. And if you feel like, okay, something is happening and we both can't deny it, go talk to your volunteer coordinator. It's probably best at that point to not volunteer any longer with the organization. Okay, that's when you would need to step aside. So those are all hard no's. Those are those pickets in the picket fence. Let's talk now a little bit about the spaces in between. Okay, some of these gray areas. What does that look like? And most often, what that looks like are the policies and procedures of your organization. And going back and asking them. So buying a gift for a patient or family. Always wrong? Probably not. Could there be a bit of a limit to what you're allowed to buy? I mean, for example, we had a lady, she was from Holland, Dutch lady. And if she was in over Christmas time at the hospice, she had a lovely little Christmas tree set up. And I happened to find, I think it was at the dollar store, a little pair of wooden shoes that she could hang on her Christmas tree. And I think they were $2 or $3. Checked with my volunteer coordinator. Is this okay? Yeah, they had a spending limit of $5 that we were allowed. I wasn't getting reimbursed. It was just something I was buying. So they might have a limit to what you can do, but to find out what is that? Is there a limit? Lending things. I have something at home that I can bring in for the family to enjoy. Maybe it's a CDs. Well, people listen to CDs anywhere. Something, a board game, something to pass the time while they're sitting there. Can I bring that in? Is that okay? Knowing that you might not get it back if it goes missing, but is it okay? Is it something I can do? Sharing personal information, including your phone number. Now, again, Is this a hard no? In some organizations, they might say yes. We're not going to encourage that. We don't want to encourage, you getting phone calls. Again, that one of the reasons why boundaries are important for your personal well-being. But they might say, well, I'm going to kind of leave it up to you. But it would be important to know the policies and procedures of that organization. Breaking down emotionally. Hey, we're all humans. We're going to be affected by people and their stories and our relationships with them. And when things are not going well, when they've been kind of maintaining this nice, steady day in, day out, and now they're declined and they're no longer eating and drinking like they used to, and maybe sleeping a lot more. And maybe feels natural just to break down and have a cry. Now that's okay. It makes us human. Where it's not okay, though, is if we are breaking down to the point where now we're needing support. Okay, now the family is supporting us because we're having a hard time keeping it together. That might be when you talk to your volunteer coordinator, your volunteer manager, and say, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be that kind of volunteer. It's just really hard. It's really hurting my heart. Maybe there's something else I can do with the organization. I really want to do something, but maybe I won't be that bedside visitor. Okay, and that's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. And the last point here, providing opinions or advice. Now, again, picket fence and out metaphor. I would say for the most part, I would never give opinions or advice, but sometimes it is maybe helpful. I think of an example of someone that says, my son hasn't come to visit me for 6 weeks, and I'm just going to get my will out and I'm going to write him out of my will. I'm just so darn mad. And I'm just, and your advice might be, yeah, absolutely. I would do that too. If my son didn't come and visit me, I would want to write him out of my. Or your advice might be, you know what would it look like if you picked up the phone and phoned him? Do you think how would that feel? Right? So providing opinions or advice, that's that gray area. And again, depends on the relationship you have with the person. Staying with a patient or family for longer than agreed upon time. So just like that well-being in the boundaries slide, why are they important? You can say, I'm 3 hours, but I'm not doing anything after this. I'm just going to go home to an empty house. I have lots of time. I'll stay longer. Maybe that's where you check with your boss. Hey, is it okay if I stay a few extra hours? Doing jobs around the patient's home. Again, uh, is that okay? Your organization would have to let you know. Providing clothes, toys, meals. Hey, I whipped up this big batch of soup yesterday and I'm just bringing some to you. And is that all right? Do you know all about their allergies, all about what they can and can't eat? And so important to check. And continuing to visit with family after a patient's death. So you might be there strictly to visit with the patient. The time has come now that they've died. But I've got to know the family and since then, going every week and I'd like to continue that. Is that okay? Talk to your volunteer manager. All right, there could be rules around that, part of the policy and procedures. And it could also be that they have a bereavement team that now will take over supporting the family. All right, let's shift gears here a little bit. A friend versus a friendly visitor. And sometimes that can feel kind of hard to tell the difference between you've been visiting with someone for weeks, maybe even months, and now you consider them a friend. Yeah, they're more than just a volunteer role for me. This is a friend I have now. But let's look at the difference between the two, between a friend and a friendly visitor or a volunteer. A friend, there's mutual support, right? One day I'm having a bad day, my friend is there to kind of pick me up or cheer me up or listen. Maybe the next time they're having a bad day at work and they want to just vent and I'm there to listen. But as a friendly visitor, you are not there to receive support. Okay, this isn't going to be about us. So even if we've had a terrible day at work and we've gone right from work to our volunteer job, we are not going to be telling them about our terrible day at work. All right, we are there to provide the support. For a friend, it's balanced, right? You know about me, I know about you, I know about that big fight you had with your husband or your wife or your kids or your parents. You know as much about me as I know about you, probably. But with a friendly visitor is imbalanced, meaning I know a lot more about you than you know about me. I know about your diagnosis. I might know about your family dynamics, who's in your life, maybe who isn't in your life, who's not coming to visit, all that kind of thing. I know a lot more about you than you know about me. That's the difference. A friend, the relationship happens when you want, right? Hey, what are you doing on Friday? Oh, nothing. Want to get together? Yeah, sure. Da, da, da. Whereas a friendly visitor, it's scheduled. Okay, I'm going to see you Wednesday at 1 p.m. Looking forward to it. Right? I come in every Wednesday. It's a scheduled visit. With a friend, you both decide how to behave, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's just going for a walk down by the river. Maybe it's watching a movie, maybe having a cocktail, staying up late, not staying up late, whatever that looks like. But a friendly visitor, when it comes time to decide how to behave, there's hospice policy around that, right? No, you're not getting them into your car and going for a drive out to the farmer's market. And, that's not going to happen. A friend, there's that gift giving. Whether it's for whatever reason, however you define gift. It could be birthdays or Christmas, or it could just be, oh, it's out today and I saw this little thing and I thought of you and here we go. But with a friendly visitor, there's that hospice policy around that. What does that look like? Is there a dollar value around it? We know that we're never going to accept or lend money, that sort of thing. So you can see there's a big difference, right? So keep that in mind when you're visiting with someone. It should be friendly, but we're not going to be a friend, like a friend in the true sense of the word. Now we're going to shift gears one more time. We're going to talk about some scenarios and how these aren't really quite so obvious. It can be for some, but for some, they might struggle with this a little bit. So a member of your client's extended family asks you to babysit his children so he and his wife can have a night out. And when I do this one, when we go on the road and I'm teaching this module, I say, show of hands, how many people think this is okay, that you could absolutely babysit? And in every single crowd, there's at least a few hands that come up. Like, oh yeah, I don't mind. I love kids. That would be not a problem at all. And maybe they really need a night out. There's probably a few more people that go, no, wouldn't do it. And for whatever reason, don't like kids, don't want the responsibility. It's not my job, it's not my role and responsibility. There's that picket fence thing. I would say if you felt inclined to say, yeah, you know what, I could babysit, check with your volunteer coordinator, your volunteer manager. All right. Could be that there comes a little bit of an issue if you're saying, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And the next volunteer goes, yeah, no, I don't do that. And all of a sudden they're kind of pitting volunteers against or comparing volunteers. It's not really great, right? And could it lead to something more? Oh, thanks so much for babysitting. I really appreciate it. You know what? I haven't got my winter tires on my car yet. If you have time, would you just mind running down to Fountain Tire and it'll just take an hour while they put my winter tires on? All of a sudden you're like, I don't know if I should be doing all these things. So just important to kind of keep in mind, like if I say yes, could it lead to more? Could it put another volunteer in a difficult position when they don't want to, right? That's the gray area. That's the space in the picket fence. Next scenario. The volunteer coordinator asks you to attend a training session to update your skills and knowledge. Now, I think when I ask this one, when we're on the road, almost everyone says yes. Yeah, of course. Then I throw in the scenario, okay, but what if the training is a Wednesday at 5 o'clock and your volunteer shift is a Thursday from 1 to 4? And I've already told you to stick to your shifts and don't go over and don't go extra. Is this still okay? And the answer for the most part is yes, it's still okay. Now, unless it's happening every week and they're asking you every week, come in for more hours and more hours, this is probably very reasonable to make the extra time to come in for that. Your client asks you to return her library books. Easy, right? Here's your library books. Driving by the library, might be driving right by it on my way home. Is it okay? Again, when I ask people, lots of people say, sure, I have no problem returning library books. Other people say, no, I don't know if I would do that, because then if I do it this time, then what is it going to be next time? What kind of errands will I be running? So again, it's that gray area, right? You might want to say, do it for you this time. I'm not really supposed to be running errands, but I don't mind helping out this one time, right? Or you say, yeah, I'm driving right by, I can do it. And then if another request comes up, like with the winter tires, can you get my winter tires on? Then you say, oh, I'm sorry, I really can't help with that. So to kind of just keep in the back of your mind, what could it lead to? But Not a hard stop. It's not the picket, right? Here's another one. Your client has a fall. She's not injured, but asks you not to tell members of her family as they'll only make a fuss. What do? You say, yeah, you know what? I respect our relationship. I am not going to tell a soul. This is our little secret. That wouldn't be safe. All right. Um, what you would want to do, what you would need to do is to let them know that, I won't tell your family, but I am going to have to tell my boss, okay? And it could be just something that's really easy to fix. Maybe like in this picture, it's that darn rug. We keep tripping over that rug. Let's get rid of that rug, okay? Let's move that. But they'll have someone come in and just look around and see. Or is it time that, they have to start looking at maybe having a walker to get around because they are falling more often, whatever that is. Maybe not a conversation you're having, but you do have to tell someone. And I would be really honest and say, you know what, I won't tell your family, but I do have to tell my boss. The other reason is she may say, well, I'm not hurt, I'm fine. But the next morning they wake up with some bruises or a lump on their head or whatever they hit. And well, that's weird. Who was the last person with them? The volunteer was the last person. That doesn't look very good, does it? So again, make sure you let somebody know, but reassure them if they're asking, don't tell the family. Say, I won't tell them, but I do have to let someone know. And lastly, your client tells you they've been having trouble sleeping. You have the same problem and take melatonin, which helps. It's a non-prescription remedy, so you suggest they give it a try. No problem, right? It's non-prescription. You can just walk into any grocery store, pharmacy, and pick some up. No, the answer is no. We cannot recommend any kind of medication, whether it's herbal or not. We don't know all the drugs they may currently be taking, if it's going to be contraindicated, and that's not our role. So there is the pivot. We're not going to do that. We're not going to suggest any sort of medication, whether it's herbal or not. Yeah. What if I change the scenario a little bit? And I don't know if you ever heard of that Calm app. It's CALM, and it's an app on your phone, and it's nice, calm, gentle music. It's very relaxing. It's supposed to help put people to sleep. Could you suggest that? Yeah, I think you could. I think there's no problem with that, right? So that there's an idea there, but not with medications, whether it's herbal or not. So what can we do if we're faced with a potential boundary issue? And not if, but when, because there's always going to be something that comes up and happens. You talk to your boss, whether it's a manager, it's a home care nurse, a social worker, whoever it is that you answer to. Chat with them, let them know, like, oh, this came up. I wasn't exactly sure what to do. I did it this time, but I'm not sure if I want to keep doing it. Was that okay? Should I have done something differently? That sort of thing. That's what they're there for. All right. So never be worried about if you're going to do the wrong thing. I've been doing this job for a lot of years, worked in a hospice for a number of years, and it comes up all the time. It comes up all the time, and I would struggle sometimes, and other times it would be more clear cut. But we could spend 10 hours talking about different scenarios. But know that you're always going to have policies and procedures, roles and responsibilities from your organization's point of view to fall back on. And there's that little inner voice that tells you, does this feel okay to me? To help guide you along the way. So you got this. If you have any questions, you can contact me through Alberta Hospice Palliative Care Association. All our details are on our website. And take care and happy volunteering. Bye now.